What's happening, everybody? My guest today is a drummer who most considered to be at the forefront of innovative and influential playing, and one that I've personally looked up to for quite some time, and Mark Guiliana. And in considering that distinction, I had no shortage of questions, that's for sure. When Mark and I caught up, where I was able to talk to him about his work with David Bowie, Avishai Cohen, Matt Cameron, and the evolution of his solo project Beat Music, as well as early mentors, teachers, modern drumming influences, as well as some of his studio mantras while tracking, plus his upcoming string of shows at the Village Vanguard and a whole lot more. So check it out, y'all. I'm psyched. Shout out to my sponsor, New Orleans Record Press. If you're looking at releasing vinyl, go on over to NewOrleansRecordPress.com to look at them sweet-ass vinyl coloring, packaging, mastering, electroplating, lacquer cutting options, as well as a real-time quote generator, and they print both 12 and 7-inch records in both 150 and 180 gram variants. They also print runs as small as 100 and up to pressings in the thousands. And they can also assist you in design and any other questions if you got them. So just give them a holler and tell them Crash Bang Boom sent you. Check them out. And that's NewOrleansRecordPress.com. Crash Bang Boom Podcast is available on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. Give me a follow, a like, a subscription, a review, etc. A glowing review at that. It would be greatly appreciated. So without further ado, here we go, y'all. The one, the only, Mark Guiliana. Crash Bang Boom.
Crowds go mad with joy.
All right, Mark Guiliana, how you doing, man?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Congrats on the new Beat Music album. When did it come out, and how's the reception been, and I guess any subsequent shows been thus far?
Yeah, everything's been cool. It came out about a month ago, April 12th, so just about a month. And since then, we had a fun release show in New York, in Brooklyn actually, at a Rough Trade, and that got filmed by NPR. And is that whole show is online, so that's cool.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and then I just got back from about 2.5 weeks in Europe, so played a bunch of shows over there. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, just keeping it moving. So all good.
Nice. Man, I was thinking back to when I originally heard you. This was in New Orleans pre-Katrina. I ended up moving to New York after Hurricane Katrina, and I think it was a year or two prior to that. And on the local radio station there, they played, is it Avishai Cohen or Avishai Cohen? I'm never sure how to pronounce his name.
Yeah, Avishai.
Yeah, I believe the record that you played at home with him, one of the songs came on at the time, and I remember thinking, whoever this drummer is, this is incredible. And I actually made note of his name and then went out and bought the CD. And that is where I actually first heard you, was, believe it or not, off of a song being played on the radio, which is pretty hilarious.
Right on.
Tell me a little bit about playing in that band at the time and what that experience was around that record and the tour or whatever shows you were doing.
I had the privilege to play with Avishai quite a lot. I met him when I was still in college, and we played a little bit around New York at that time, but shortly after I graduated, right after I graduated, he invited me to be in his touring band, and that was 2003, and then I was with him until 2008. So it was like 5-6 years of really intense touring. We made 6 records during that time.
Wow.
Most of the stuff was in Europe. There were many firsts with him, lots of touring opportunities and experiences and all that stuff. Through him, met some of my favorite musicians, got to play with them. So yeah, it was a really intense time, and very grateful for it, especially right out of college. It was very special.
Yeah, man. I mean, had you done much in the way of touring prior to hooking up with him? Because it sounds like you get with him and then it gets pretty busy, and then you've got a few years you're looking back on of being in Europe and doing all that. So was that kind of your foray into touring to that extent?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I was a bit of a late bloomer. So all through college, I was a student first and foremost. So college was definitely keeping me busy and getting me prepared to a certain degree. And then yeah, it was first time going to Europe, first time really playing really proper gigs, and we just hit the ground running. So it was great.
Wow. Well, the next time that I started seeing you here in New York, obviously at that point I was living here, and you were doing some stuff at this venue, Rose Live, that was in Williamsburg.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I used to go check you out over there, and it was always awesome, such an intimate venue, and be able to stand close and kind of watch what in the world you were doing and piece together to visually have some sort of a correlation between this guy that I'd only heard in recorded form was really cool. Was that around the time when you were first starting to do like more solo stuff around that phase?
Yeah, the first time I recorded my own music was with a band called Hearnt, and that record. That was recorded in 2005, came out in 2006. It's called Locked in a Basement. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so it was the first time really recording my own songs and really kind of doing everything from the ground up. And then towards the end of the life of that band, it was maybe 2008, 2009, I started playing shows under my name. And yeah, a lot of which were at Rose. Rose, they were very generous. They gave me... It was pretty much, I played every 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, they would just let us do whatever we wanted. So it was definitely like the earliest starts of what would become beat music. So
yeah.
So really, obviously this new beat music record is new, of course, but it's actually a culmination of at least 10 years of playing and experimenting and exploring, and those Rose gigs were an important part of that DNA, because at that time I would bring some compositions, but mostly those nights were pretty improvised. That's so much fun, and especially with such great musicians, it could really go to some cool places, and to learn from that and try to develop from there. So that was a fun time. I'm glad you could catch some of that.
Yeah, it's really cool, man. I wish I would have had better phones at the time. Maybe I would have had some video to go along with some of that, but it's pretty funny about technology. But one question I had for you that kind of ties into both of those things is that I've always enjoyed your ability to capture a sort of live energy and live sort of improvisational spirit in your recorded performances. And it's always been kind of hard for me, I guess, whenever I get into the studio to not be a little bit in my head and feel the pressure of being in a studio. So I was just wondering if there was any particular mantra that you tell yourself or anything that you've done, or has it just been experience to where when you get into a studio, at least from the listener's perspective, you've always just sounded free, and that the studio wasn't so confining as it can feel sometimes,
Right, yeah, I guess there's a couple layers to that. Sometimes, I guess the first thing is, is the live energy appropriate for the recording? Because that isn't always the case. I mean, in improvised music, quite often that is the case. You want to capture that live spirit, but sometimes it's actually okay, or the right thing to, attack it in a different way. And so that's the first part, like, are we going for the live thing or not? And if not, that's okay. That's kind of a intuitive decision. I always just think, I didn't really feel this as deeply until I started recording my own music, but, in some ways, and this is case by case for the recordings, but in some ways it's more about documenting the song, the composition, the best that you can. Mm-hmm. And then whatever performance is needed to document the song in the best way is the priority, rather than documenting the coolest performance. Because I kind of think the performances, and especially nowadays with so much sharing and, like there's lots of live things that pop up online or social media, it's like that's more of the performance element. And I think for the recordings, my goal is always to just represent the song the best we can. So sometimes that does also mean like a really exciting, performance element.
Yeah.
But not always, you know.
Right.
So with that in mind, if a certain song is asking for like the true live energy, you just have to play from that. And this takes a long time. I'm still working on it, but to just get to that place where like nothing can go wrong. What can go wrong? We're in the studio. We could always do another take. What are the consequences if you take a chance, if you play from that free place and something quote unquote goes wrong? It's like nothing can go wrong. Especially when it's my own music, it's like this is the time to play from that place, to really get to that place and try to express. So I understand if it's on somebody else's watch, you're being asked to play a certain way and you feel a little confined, and all that's okay. Again, as long as it's at the service of the song, But for me, I just try to get to that place where nothing can go wrong. So why not just take chances in that moment and see what happens?
Well, that, I guess, would lead me to a couple other artists that you've worked with in the studio, at least, one of which being the Black Star record with David Bowie. Congrats on that. Such a cool record.
Thank you.
Yeah. From a drumming perspective going into that, were there tracks that were demoed for you, or like MIDI drum parts or anything? Or were you brought in just kind of with a blank slate and it was like kind of do your thing? How did you sculpt those parts, and what was your experience recording that record?
There were demos for all the songs, and they just had kind of programmed stuff or drum machines on there. So my goal was just to really try to bring those parts to the acoustic kit, and yeah, with program drum parts and program music in general, not everything is always playable in real time. There might be things layered on top of each other, stacked.
Yeah.
Try to just, again, bring that stuff, try to present it in the most organic way that felt comfortable on the kit. But yeah, a lot of those parts were in David's demos. There were a lot of information in the demos, so we were just trying to convey that stuff and get a great performance. We were all playing in the same room for every take, so there was definitely a band feeling, and we were feeding off each other, and it was an incredible experience.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, were you aware of his health status while you were recording it? And if so, did that, in hindsight, do you feel as though that might have affected or elevated or whatever, everyone's performance and track in that record?
No, I mean, the record came out about a year after we had worked on it. So yeah, he was in good spirits, and we didn't need any extra motivation to be at our best. We were all really trying to just be in that moment and give it all we had. Yeah,
it's awesome, man. Another person that you've worked with that I'm admittedly jealous over is one of my favorite drummers, and Matt Cameron. And you worked with him on the Cave Dweller record, right?
Yep.
Did you play on the whole record or just some tracks?
Essentially the whole record. I think Matt played on one or two of the tunes. But yeah, I mean, that was an incredible experience. He is absolutely one of my favorite drummers, and we connected after the Black Star record had come out. He's a big Bowie fan, and we connected and hit it off, and he invited me to be a part of the recording. So it's definitely special, and yeah, I feel lucky to call him a friend for sure.
That's awesome. It's cool listening to that record because he has such an effortless kind of odd time feel. It's one of the things that I always loved about his playing in Soundgarden. They're one of those rare bands, maybe say, other than Alice in Chains, who would at times would have a hit on the radio that wasn't in 4/4, and he has such an incredibly smooth ability to play odd time music and odd transitions and this and that and the other. It could kind of elude, I think, the average listener. So that is one of the many aspects that I always dug about his playing, and it was cool to hear you playing on his stuff with him singing and the whole nine. That's pretty amazing. You got to work with him for sure.
Yeah, it was super fun. I mean, again, similar process. All those songs had demos, and a lot of the drum parts were programmed just for reference. But, I have such respect for him and specifically his compositional sense when it comes to parts. So I stayed really close to the demos and just tried to bring them to life a little bit.
Wow. So I saw you at this Sabian cymbal demonstration at the Guitar Center near Times Square a few years ago. And on that demonstration, you had said that one of your early teachers was there in the audience, and you gave him props. I was going to ask you again who that was, and tell me a little bit about your relationship with him.
Yeah, I'd love to. His name's Joe Bergamini, and he was my first teacher. I hadn't played any drums before I started studying with him. So it really all came from him and that time with him, and an incredible teacher. He's about 10 years older than me, so I started when I was 15, so he was only 25, and I'm really so impressed by how clear his teachings were and how together he was for being a young guy, and he really gave me the foundation that I needed to kind of find my own path from there, and still see him, and he's still definitely a mentor for me. So it's not always up to us who our first teachers are. He was the local guy, so I lucked out in the sense that I got to be with him.
Interesting. And I mean, in those formative years, was it a lot of the I guess, fundamental, be it rudimental, sort of independence concepts that you were working on? Was it more jazz? Was it, I don't know, what did you primarily work on in those early years with him, I guess? Yeah,
it was a lot of, we started on the pad for a while. Maybe we didn't even get to the drum set for a couple months, a lot of emphasis on technique. Really the fundamentals of just getting to know the instrument, and stylistically there wasn't any particular focus. It was making sure there was a grasp on wide variety of styles, and all very, very essential teachings.
Cool. I interviewed Josh Dion a while back, and I can't remember if he said that y'all went to high school or if you went to college together. Which was that?
Yeah, we were in college together at William Patterson.
I guess once you're at William Patterson, is that where you started to study and delve heavier into more jazz concepts and get deeper into jazz?
Definitely. Yeah, I think throughout high school I was getting into jazz a bit more, but I only had the high school big band was the only outlet for that. So it seemed like the best path to take for a drum set, in a university situation was in a jazz program. So that led me to William Patterson.
In looking back on it, it's kind of a devil's advocate question, because I asked Nate Wood this, and he actually had a preference for one or the other, or maybe said one influenced him more than the other, I should say. But between Elvin Jones or Tony Williams, do you feel as though you could pinpoint one to be more influential than the other on your playing?
I think they've always been very close to each other in regards to influences. I think when I was younger, it was Tony, and this could absolutely change. But nowadays, I feel a little more connected to Elvin. But it's just by very, very small margins. They're both equally important for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. I growing up and just buying jazz records, and I did a little bit of studying with drummers in New Orleans as well, and I've always been fascinated by it, but I think when I've really kind of got my mind blown by it was, and I talked a little bit with Nate Wood as well, was listening to Four and More and realizing that Tony Williams, was like, 17 or 18 or however young he was, and just ripping apart those tracks. It's such a ridiculous performance.
Absolutely.
I can't even imagine having that command of the instrument at that age, and I still don't. It just seems otherworldly to me. I don't understand it.
Yeah, and of course the technique is one thing, but I mean the level of musicianship and
Right.
the way he's interacting with the other musicians and
Yeah.
really driving that music is scary.
Yeah, seriously. Well, with your jazz solo projects, obviously you lean more towards jazz, and then with the beat music stuff, I'd say that's kind of like your interpretation of maybe some of the electronic influence. But I think there's definitely a gray area in your playing, and I can hear a little bit of bleed over in both, so to speak. So it kind of goes back to the jazz thing. But would you say jazz is the foundation of most of your playing in either of those pursuits?
Not necessarily. I think, really, I try not to think about any of these styles.
Yeah.
I feel like, I understand the value for conversation's sake, the idea of genres and being able to,
Right.
talk about things in a cleaner way. But I feel like those things are so ingrained in our minds that it takes, I've spent a lot of effort trying to, because those things essentially divide things.
Uh-huh.
They put walls between things. So for me, I've definitely put a lot of energy into trying to find the way things are alike rather than what makes them different, And so for me, sometimes those labels just continue to divide things. But for me, it all feels the same. When I sit down, I'm just trying to play what feels best for that moment,
Yeah.
I think maybe because jazz has a strong emphasis on improvisation, you could point to that as a bit of a starting place, but improvising absolutely doesn't have to mean jazz.
True.
So I think creating things in the moment, it's like Soundgarden in the early days, I'm sure they're working on a riff and they start improvising, they start making things up in that moment. I mean, that doesn't make it jazz,
Right.
So I think even with the beat music project, and I'm fine, like I'm not the guy that says, no, this isn't jazz. It's like whatever people choose to call it is fine with me because that's just what they choose.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, beat music, because it does include improvising and a lot of the spirit of improvising is in that music, that's fine if that feels like a jazz place. But I think it's more of a mentality rather than a style or a sound.
Well, I guess as far as electronic music, and this could have been early on in the early years when you were kind of forming the ideas that would ultimately become beat music like we were talking about, or even just today, are there any particular electronic artists that have had a kind of lasting impact on you? I mean, I know for me, it'll always be Square Pusher. I think that something about the way he constructs whatever wild magic that happens with his stuff. It has always been kind of a special for me to hear how he interprets things. So I was just curious if you had any particular electronic artists who you really dig.
Yeah, of course, Square Pusher, Aphex Twin, and Luke Vibert, and I like Photech.
Yeah. So a lot of the early drum and bass stuff.
Yep. And yeah, there are plenty of live examples of that stuff too that I got to see over the years. People, playing this stuff live that really was helpful to see because there's so much mystery in just the recorded format of that music that it was definitely encouraging to see how people were pulling it off live.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I feel like some of the earlier guys that were doing that, I always point to JoJo Mayer, and he's always a guy that whose playing I've always loved. I love the recordings. I go see him any chance I can get, and he was one of the first guys that I heard even really talking about sort of the reverse engineering of electronic music and how to play it live and stuff. So always, from him, and then up to more recent guys that at least I've been seeing more recently, I should say, whether it's D'Anthony Parks or Nate Wood or some of those guys. New York is it's an amazing place for the hybrids of all kind, not just music, people, everything, So it's been amazing since I've been living here, I guess going on 13 years, to be seeing some of these drummers and how they interpret. I consider you one of those drummers as well. Are there any other ones that I left out? I'm sure there's tons.
Yeah, I mean, the first guy that comes to mind is Zach Danziger.
Sure.
He and JoJo, I think, were kind of the two pioneers. Zach has been at it since the mid-'90s for sure, with his band Boomish and many, many other exploits. But yeah, I think for me, JoJo and Zach were the two real-life examples of guys pulling it off live and creating that energy and creating those sounds. And like I said, it was key for me to actually see people doing it, because otherwise it's quite daunting.
Yeah, seriously. Well, any particular tours or any other releases or anything going on in 2019 that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, beat music is the priority for now, and supporting that record, and we'll be in Japan in July, and then around the States, some stuff in October, back to Europe in November. Coming up is my jazz quartet will be at the Village Vanguard for a week, which is really exciting. For me, the Vanguard is really my favorite place to play music.
Wow.
All the history that's happened there is really a true honor to be able to present my own music there. So that's at the end of May. And then, there's some stuff with Avishai, actually.
Oh, really?
We made a record called Gently Disturbed, and that came out in 2008. Okay. So last year was the 10th anniversary of that album, so they booked some gigs for that. And those were really fun, so we have some more stuff this year. We're going to be in Japan the end of August. We'll be at the Blue Note in New York for a few nights in August.
Awesome.
So there's a lot of running around, but of course the Vanguard is really, a major highlight for me. But otherwise, we're just kind of keeping the momentum going with beat music.
Awesome, man. Well, Mark, it was great talking to you, man. Like I said, I'm a big fan of your playing and always look forward to whatever projects, one of the myriad projects that you're involved in. It's always exciting to hear you playing, and anytime I could see you live, it's always a fascinating experience. So
awesome.
Thanks for catching up with me, and good luck in 2019, man.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, man.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to Mark for catching up to talk drums, albeit at 10 a.m. when we were both probably a little groggy and not firing on all cylinders, or at least I can speak for myself there. But it was great to talk drums, life, studio recordings, his solo projects, and the many incredible artists he's worked with. So keep your ears and eyes open. Check him out at the Village Vanguard. We'll catch you on the next one. Crash, bang, boom!